The biggest middleweight fight in UFC history is taking place at UFC 319. Khamzat Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis on an insane fight card with maybe not the biggest in name values, but an insane lineup of 15 fights, including the Ultimate Fighter finale, where I will break down every single fight from top to bottom and break down the stylistic matchups that we have so I can let you guys know who is going to win every single fight and why they will win. Moving down to the start of the card. Now, on the UFC website, they do not have the Ultimate Fighter finales because they're not all announced yet. One of them is. The other one, actually, today or tonight, is being announced. But the rumored ones, spoiler, I probably should have put the alert before. The rumored ones are Ali B. Idris versus Morales. It's kind of in the way, isn't it? Ali B. Idris versus Joseph Morales. I'm going to start off with that fight. Ali B. Idris, in my opinion, is a much better fighter overall. I think he's much more dangerous on the feet. I think he's going to be able to manage the grappling of Morales. I don't really like Morales' game of getting it to the ground. I think he's a little bit too hittable on the feet. And I think Alibi can either hurt him on the feet and probably knock him out on the feet or win a pretty handily decision. Win a decision pretty handily. We're off to a bad start here. Anyways, yeah, I think Alibi's going to be able to hurt Morales on the feet, manage the grappling. I think he can get his own positions at times, and I do think Alibi is going to win this fight by decision or possibly even knockout. Moving on to Cezinando versus Donchenko. Donchenko is the better striker here. Donchenko is the slicker striker. He has an interesting style where he kind of is standing upright, bouncing around, and trying to land some big shots, but at times he is pretty low volume, and that's not really good against a pressure-style grappler in Cezinando. Well, bear with my voice, by the way. I don't know what's going on with it. I'm actually trying to lose weight and actually working out for a bit. And for whatever reason, it's gassing out my voice. And me talking more on TikToks and live streams and trying to make these YouTube videos, it's cooking my voice. But I'm doing my best here. Cezinando, pressure, grappling. The upside with that, the aggression. I think he'll be able to land a couple shots on Donchenko and get him in these positions in the grappling where Donchenko knows he's going to want to grapple him in. Obviously, Donchenko's made it this far in the Ultimate Fighter, but I do think Cezinando, just better overall aggression, better overall pressure, better overall pushing this pace, and getting Donchenko in a position where, because Donchenko doesn't throw the volume, doesn't throw the output, he's going to be losing a lot of minutes in this 3-round fight, where I think Cezinando ends up edging out by decision. So I'm going Cezinando and Idris in this fight. Now, done with these, let's go to the UFC, or the ones on the UFC page, rather. If it wants to let me open it, that would be very nice. It won't let me open it. What's going on with this? Okay, but just the Silva fight. Okay, great. So, Carine Silva versus Deonna Barbosa. Interesting fight. JJ Aldrich was supposed to fight Carine Silva. Ends up pulling out. Deonna Barbosa steps in. Earlier on in their careers, Carine Silva, I think this was 6 years ago or 4 years ago, I can't remember exactly, lost to Deonna Barbosa by decision. I believe Carine Silva at this stage of her career is a little bit better on the feet than Barbosa. Slick-wise, in my opinion, technically she's better than the Barbosa on the feet. Barbosa is a big swinger, but apart from that, I don't think she really has much to offer on the feet. That's going to be able to set up enough against Silva. Now, Barbosa is a little bit more physical, but she's nowhere near the better grappler than Silva, in my opinion. I think Silva is much more dangerous on the mat, both off her back and on top. I think she has a lot more to offer, a lot more danger, and I think Barbosa is not going to be able to get the same position she got against a much younger Carine Silva at the time. And I think Carine Silva is going to be able to win better positions on the mat. I think she's going to be able to land slightly better strikes on the feet, keep it at distance a little bit better, and Carine Silva will win a decision in this fight. Could also submit Deonna Barbosa, because Barbosa is susceptible to a lot of things that Carine Silva is good at. I just think Silva was a little bit earlier in her career at the time she fought Barbosa, where Barbosa is a little bit more developed. Give me Carine Silva by decision, possibly submission in that fight. Moving on to Bryan Battle versus Nursultan Ruziboyev. Now, pretty insane that Bryan Battle's going up to 185. I don't like this overall. I think he's much better at 170. I think he has a pretty good size advantage at 170. He's submitting a 4-inch height advantage. The last time we saw him at 185, I believe, was against Rinat Fakhretdinov, where he didn't look good. He looked like he was getting outmanned. He was a little bit too small for that 185 weight class. Although he's not way too small for the class. It's just when you face a guy that's a lot bigger at 185, you can start seeing why Bryan Battle typically should be fighting at 170, although he made it in the Ultimate Fighter as a 185er and won it as a 185er. Nonetheless, it was Andre Petroski that he beat. But maybe Andre Petroski in the Ultimate Fighter and like Tresean Gore, Gilbert Urbina. Look at the names I'm telling you about. Anyways, Bryan Battle versus Nursultan Ruziboyev. Ruziboyev honestly is way too hittable. I think he's pretty chinny as well. I think Dustin Stoltzfus, as much as he's improving in the UFC, is, in my opinion, still a lot worse than Bryan Battle is. And even though Bryan Battle is better at 170, I think he could still manage to win some fights against hittable opponents at 185 pounds. Guys who I don't think have some really good wrestling credentials that are going to be taking down Bryan Battle relentlessly. And I think Ruziboyev is that style matchup where Bryan Battle can come in against a guy who just got a fraudulent win over Dustin Stoltzfus, where Stoltzfus definitely won that fight. And I think he's going to be able to crack Ruzaboyev. I think Ruzaboyev is going to get hurt in this fight. And I think Ruzaboyev is going to get knocked out by Brian Battle. Give me Brian Battle by knockout, 185 pounds, against Nursultan Ruzaboyev. And then hopefully he goes back down to 170 because I do not want to see him moving forward. I just don't see Ruzaboyev offering him anything. Edson Barbosa versus Drakkar Klose. Interesting because Edson Barbosa is coming back into the UFC lightweight division after a pretty decent layoff. But both guys are old. It's not like he's fighting a spring chicken by any means. Drakkar Klose is pretty old in his own right. But I think Edson Barbosa will land the better shots in this fight. I think Drakkar Klose is a little bit too open, and I think Edson Barbosa is actually a little bit better defensively, even at this stage of his career. I think he's a little bit quicker. I think he's a little bit more explosive, and it's honestly saying something considering he's about 40 years old. But yeah, Klose has never really been somebody who's going to be edging top 15 level. I think he was close to it against Beneil Dariush, obviously, and then ended up getting knocked out anyways. He's a pretty baseline fighter where he's okay at everything, not necessarily great at anything. I think Edson's kicks are going to separate in this fight a lot. I think Edson on the back foot, obviously never my preferred position, but this is an Edson Barbosa fight. It's typically Edson Barbosa on the back foot, and he manages it pretty much better than most people who have fought a career off the back foot. And I think the leg kicks are going to be big for him. I think he's going to find some good shots up top against Klose. Klose took a ridiculous amount of damage recently. And honestly, the level of competition Edson's been losing to is pretty decent level of competition. He's very, very high level competition at 145, where he's not as drained right now at 155 pounds. And honestly, he might be bigger than Drakkar Klose in this fight. Give me the size advantage. You give me a guy who's quicker. That I think Edson's still more durable than Drakkar Klose is. If you watch that Sadiq Youssef fight, I think Edson is more durable than Drakkar Klose is at this point. Fighting a better level competition, competing against him a little bit better than what Klose is competing against. Yeah, I think Edson Barbosa is going to handily win this one by decision. I wouldn't even be surprised to see like some random knockout in this where Barbosa lands a big shot overhand right and then Klose gets dropped. But yeah, give me Edson Barbosa by decision in this one, getting a nice little comeback, 155 pounds on a pay-per-view. Unfortunately, on the prelims, but nonetheless, because we get Chase Hooper on the early prelims, because we get Chase Hooper on the prelims. Edson Barbosa on the early prelims, but Chase Hooper on the prelims. Anyways, at the baseline, I mean, at least they're trying to build up Chase Hooper. He's fighting Alexander Hernandez, which I guess stub him in competition at this point, right? But I still think he should beat Hernandez. Hernandez is decent, but the problem with Hernandez is he's a little bit too hittable on the feet, and I don't think Hooper's good at all by any means on the feet. I think he's wildly overrated right now at this point, somehow at this stage of his career on the feet, because he dropped Vyacheslav Borshev, who, yes, he's a good boxer, but at the same time, Slava Borshev is quite literally as hittable as it gets on the feet. I mean, anybody can hit him on the feet. Offensively, great boxer. Defensively, half of you guys can land a good shot on Borshev in a good fight. Anyways, Chase Hooper, right now, this version of Borshev at the bare minimum. Anyways, Chase Hooper, I think he's a much better grappler than Alexander Hernandez. I think Hernandez honestly puts himself in some very, very bad positions on the mat to where he gets himself screwed over by a lot of grapplers and loses minutes to a lot of grapplers. I think Chase Hooper positionally is a lot better than most of these guys that Hernandez is submitting these opportunities to. And Hernandez isn't necessarily the biggest 155er in the world. I think Hooper, honestly, in size, may be able to match him. And I think Hooper is just, again, much better overall in the grappling department, and I think that's where a lot of this fight's going to be able to take place. I don't think Hernandez is going to be landing anything too big up top. I don't think he's going to be putting too much work to the body. I don't think he's honestly capable of that to accumulate damage in those regards. Otherwise, he would have done it against Damon Jackson, who I think is a lot worse than Chase Hooper is, and stylistically a much easier matchup for Alexander Hernandez than Chase Hooper. Nonetheless, we ended up seeing Alexander Hernandez lose to Damon Jackson. And yes, I don't want to play this MMA math game, but I think styles are very resemblant between Damon Jackson and Chase Hooper, except Chase Hooper's a little bit more explosive, a little bit more dangerous, a lot more dangerous in my opinion on the mat. I think Chase Hooper's going to be able to manage on the feet enough in this fight. Maybe nothing great, but enough against Alexander Hernandez. And I mean, Hernandez was getting landed on pretty often against Damon Jackson in that fight. I think Hooper's going to win by submission. I think Alexander Hernandez is going to be put in some pretty bad spots, and I think Hooper's going to be able to finish him by submission in this fight. But on the feet, it's never going to be a wash for Hooper. It's always going to be a concern as long as that fight is standing. Now, Jessica Andrade versus Lupi Godinez. You're giving me Jessica Andrade at strawweight, where she is, in my opinion, the harder hitter in this fight. Lupi Godinez is supposed to be the better wrestler. However, when do you really see Lupi Godinez taking control of somebody on the mat and honestly getting some good top time over them and keeping them there and landing some good shots? Not too often. The Pilastri fight, honestly, not the best of looks for her. She looked very hittable in that fight and looked like she was kind of gassing a little bit towards the end of it. Maybe not gassing necessarily, but was definitely winded a little bit. And I think Jessica Andrade is going to be able to put together a better 3 rounds. I think Jessica Andrade is going to be able to land a lot on Lupi. Although Andrade, in my opinion, is not that good of a striker overall. She does hit hard. She does put it in combination. And I think Loopy being a little bit too hittable overall in this fight, and Andrade being very physical at strawweight. Apart from Tatiana Suarez, you don't really see Jessica Andrade getting manhandled at all at strawweight. I think this is like a great fight for her at strawweight against a relatively decently sized name in Loopy Godinez, someone with some stature at 125 right now, or 115 right now, sorry. Where people actually thought Loopy Godinez was like a championship level contender, where quite literally every single fight with some sort of difficulty in stylistic matchups she struggles in, like, pretty substantially, and I think Andrade is that, if anything worse. I think Andrade can meet her in strength. I think Andrade, you don't really see her getting destroyed in the grappling at 115, and I think she's going to be able to land the bigger shots, and she could hurt Loopy in this fight, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised, like, completely shocked to see Andrade knock out Loopy Godinez, but at the same time, I do think Andrade probably just lands the bigger shots. Loopy manages. She is relatively durable overall, and I think Andrade is going to be able to keep her, to keep winning minutes in this fight with bigger moments than Loopy, defend a lot of these takedowns, get up from anything that does get her down, and she's going to be able to win this fight by decision at the bare minimum. And it's a pretty good fight overall. I think it's a very well-matched fight between these two. Gerald Meerschaert versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, the typical binary grappler versus striker fight where Oleksiejczuk pretty slick boxing, really good body work, really great left hand overall, and he's been training with the Fighting Nerds recently. Probably the last year or so, at least, he's been training with the Fighting Nerds, it seems like, and I don't know how much better that's going to make his grappling, but at the bare minimum, Gerald Meerschaert looks like he's on a complete decline. I mean, I can't really trust Gerald Meerschaert to shoot into double leg right now and get a good takedown on Oleksiejczuk, but at the same time, Oleksiejczuk knocked down Kevin Holland badly, then goes in and gets himself armbarred and gets his arm torn off. It's a really weird situation for Oleksiejczuk, where he honestly should be able to manage Gerald Meerschaert at this stage of Meerschaert's career, where he looked slower than ever. He really looked labored. He doesn't really look like he could shoot a takedown to save his life. I don't really see how Meerschaert's going to be able to get inside and get Oleksiejczuk down. If he does, night and day difference on the mat. I mean, Gerald Meerschaert could submit him right there then. I'm just not going to be too confident in Meerschaert's durability at this stage of his career, considering the damage he's taken. I don't think this is going to be some vintage Gerald Meerschaert performance where he gets dropped, hurt, and then all of a sudden Mikhail goes for the finish on the mat, and then Meerschaert throws up a triangle, reverses the position, gets the back, and chokes out Mikhail. I don't see it, but again, like, when do you really see it with Gerald Meerschaert? I just don't see it at this stage. After the damage he's taken, I think there's an accumulation. I think Mikhail hits like a truck. I think he's going to be able to hit him to the body pretty well, and I think he's going to be able to knock out Gerald Meerschaert in this fight. However, with these two, like knowing what these two have done in their careers on both the positive and negative ends of the spectrums, very, very possible of Gerald Meerschaert getting one of those vintage moments against Mikhail, and obviously like a Kevin Holland-esque moment like Holland had against Oleksiejczuk. But nonetheless, I'm still picking Oleksiejczuk by knockout. He should be getting this knockout, which nonetheless inevitably means that he's not going to. Anyways, CDF versus Bobby Green. I'm picking CDF in this fight. I am not as confident in CDF as I was on Monday when I made the prediction, literally yesterday. Although it's late into it. But anyways, I think Bobby Green can manage some of the takedowns of CDF. I think Bobby Green is a little bit slicker on the feet. However, his reactions are a little bit slower. But these are two old men fighting at the end of the day. I think CDF is the better grappler. I like the pressure that CDF offers. But at the same time, am I really going to be... My bad, King Green, not Bobby Green. Am I really going to call another man King? No, Bobby Green. Mr. Green, that's better. Mr. Green is probably not going to beat CDF. Dude, it's a close fight. I can't even lie to myself. It's a close fight. I think CDF's the better grappler, but Bobby Green typically is pretty decent overall in defending a lot of takedowns against guys who are not Dagestani or some insane high-level wrestler. I think Bobby Green's style is actually going to be a little bit difficult for CDF to deal with, but I think CDF is a little bit more durable at this stage of his career. I mean, honestly, a lot more durable than Bobby Green is. I think Bobby's been taking a very ridiculous amount of damage, and CDF can hit. CDF can pressure you. Bobby Green, honestly, has been accepting back foot a little bit in these fights, and I don't really think it's a good idea for him to do that against CDF. I think he should come out moving forward, and CDF's power really is taken away on the back foot. And then he tries to resort to grappling, tries to resort to moving on the outside, which he's nowhere near as good at when he is on the front foot pressuring, like he did against Matasha Rebecca, and he won. Yeah, I like CDF in the fight. I think he can probably hurt Bobby Green in the feet. I think Bobby could also hurt CDF. When he gets to the scrambling, I trust CDF a little bit more, and much better jiu-jitsu, much better grappler overall. But at the same time, he's been fragile throughout his career. They are both pretty old. It's a very, very risky fight for both guys, and it's a very malleable fight on both ends. I'm not too confident on either end, but I do think CDF will win, and I think it could very well result in a finish. I think the winner of this more than likely finishes the fight. I'm picking CDF. I'm going to say by knockout in the fight. I don't think he's going to submit Bobby. I think Bobby will defend these submission attempts, and he can either get ground and pound or he's going to get really badly hurt and finish. I'm going to go CDF by knockout in that fight, but a very good fight at that and a very tough fight to predict. Moving on to the main card, we have Kaya Sakura versus Tim Elliott. People think that Kaya Sakura is a horrific grappler. I mean, somebody who cannot defend a takedown, cannot defend grappling positions whatsoever. If you go watch back that Pantoja fight, considering it was his first ever fight in the UFC against the highest level competition, landed an insane flying knee on Pantoja coming in. He defended a lot of these positions against Pantoja early on. Obviously, Pantoja ended up getting in a choke, I believe, in round 2, if not round 3. I think it was round 2. But he looked pretty decent, honestly, defending a lot of these spots, getting up from these Pantoja takedowns. Avoiding the back take early on. And obviously, Pantoja is a completely different monster. I mean, this guy's pressured. This guy's attacks with the body kick. This guy's moving forward with the strikes and getting in with those double legs and the single leg chains and the relentlessness of him. I mean, this isn't... Tim Elliott sometimes does fight with that style, but it's not the same. Doesn't have the same emphasis as Pantoja does. No, nowhere near. And obviously, Tim Elliott's on the later end of his UFC career. Yes, he's only been knocked out once, and it was way early in his career. I mean, literally right at the beginning of his career. But I think Kaya Sakura is going to be able to land big on him. I think Kaya Sakura is going to be able to hurt him bad any single time he comes in. I think Tim Elliott's timing on these takedowns, especially at this stage of his career with the layoff he's had as well, is not going to look good. I think he's going to look very telegraphed. I think Kaya Sakura is going to be able to time him very well. And now Sakura is going to hurt him. This guy's a tricky striker. This guy's a really good explosive striker. And he's fantastic. He's actually legit. And I think he's one of the best flyweights in the world. And I think he's going to hurt Tim Elliott bad. I think he's going to knock out Tim Elliott. I think Tim Elliott's going to have his first knockout loss in the UFC. I think Kaya Sakura is going to hand him that knockout loss. Being the better striker, being more explosive, timing these takedowns, defending any single takedown that Elliott might have. Even if Elliott gets him down, I think Sakura gets back up, lands something on the break, either a knee to the body or an elbow in the clinch, and he's going to be able to land some big shots on Elliott, and I think he's going to be able to hurt Elliott big time. I could see a knee, I could see a good right hand. I think Kaya Sakura is a much better overall fighter than Tim Elliott, especially at this stage of the career, athletic difference. Yeah, give me Kaya Sakura by knockout in this fight to start the card off with a bang. Now, moving on to a fight that's probably going to be boring without moments. If there are any moments, we can have some fun with it. But MVP is going to be able to keep Jared Cannonier at bay. He's going to be able to move a little bit quick for Cannonier. Cannonier, honestly, really good fighter overall, especially considering this stage of his career and how he's... Honestly, the peak of his career was towards like 36, 37, the older end of his career. But nonetheless, a much taller, much longer striker who uses his length and uses his range, where you don't really see too many strikers being able to use it to their advantage, especially with MVP's style, being able to hop for 3 5-minute rounds. Even, honestly, we've seen him across, I believe, 5 5-minute rounds in Bellator, if I'm not wrong, against Douglas Lima. I think it was actually 3 rounds, if I'm not wrong. But nonetheless, MVP across 3 rounds is going to be able to keep Jared Cannonier at bay. I feel like Cannonier is going to have a very hard time getting it on the inside against MVP. I feel like the way Adesanya, and I'm not saying MVP is the same striker as Prime Adesanya, however, it's pretty similarly tricky. Adesanya was a little bit more flat-footed at the time. Adesanya was somebody who was basing off of his timing and basing off of his ability to get out of the way without having that constant hopping karate-style type fight as Michael Page does. But Cannonier struggled to get in on the inside of Adesanya, even though Adesanya wasn't as much of a moving target, although he would circle the cage. He wasn't always bouncing around like MVP, in and out. Jared Cannonier has to time MVP. He really has to time him. I mean, he has to time him cutting off the cage, getting a good shot, as MVP has to try to circle away. He has to get a really big shot to try to get him in. He has to force a clinch and try to not get caught. But he's been taking a really, really large amount of damage in his career. Jared Cannonier has, especially as of recent, at the later end of his career. RoboCop dropped him twice or 3 times. Imavov hurt him pretty badly and got him with the finish. I mean, Bahallo hurt him very, very badly, although the Imavov stoppage was bad. There's still a lot of damage accumulated in that fight. Bahallo hurt him big time in that fight as well. I mean, he's legit. He's competing in these fights, and obviously he won the RoboCop fight. But it's still a lot of damage at this stage of his career. It's a lot of damage to take, and honestly, MVP can hit you pretty hard with that right hand. Although I do think he only has a right hand, he still uses it very effectively. MVP doesn't really use a jab as often. His left hook is honestly pretty bad. But I think, honestly, his right hand is money. And I think he's going to be able to keep his distance, find that right hand at times, time Jared Cannonier, get him on like when Cannonier sets on that back foot every now and then. We're trying to reset. I think MVP does a really good job at finding that reset point in a fighter and then timing his right hand on them so that guy doesn't really counter him as often. Gives him time as well to pop right back out. As quick as he already looks trying to pop back out, I think he does a really good job timing these guys as they lay flat for a split second. And MVP does a really good job at that. And I think this is a pretty good matchup for him. And I think the UFC is doing something pretty deliberate with this where, okay, MVP staying at middleweight for this fight. How can we get MVP, a good win against a good fighter who's on a pretty good run. I mean, at the bare minimum, had a really crazy win in the main event against RoboCop. I mean, this is a pretty good setup for MVP against Jared Cannonier, where MVP could start fighting pretty high-level fights in the UFC. But I think MVP is going to win by decision. Could hurt Jared Cannonier and find a knockout, but I'd be surprised, to be honest. I'm very, very much expecting a decision from MVP. Carlos Prates versus Jeff Neal. I think Prates is a better overall fighter. I think Prates is better at distance. I think Prates keeps his distance, and he's a style fighter that Jeff Neal doesn't necessarily do the best with. But Prates isn't necessarily that long. He's not that big of a striker. He does have a long reach, don't get me wrong. Very, very long reach, but not too much longer than Jeff Neal. And Neal is a better boxer on the inside. That's what's concerning about this fight, because Prates, in my opinion, not that great of an inside pocket boxer. He's a really good kickboxer at distance. I think he's able to find his left hand a lot on Jeff Neal. I know Jeff Neal's been taking a really, really substantial amount of damage later on in his career recently, especially that Shavkat Rakhmonov performance. And he has struggled against guys who are longer, rangier than him, like Carlos Prates, like Ian Garry, like Neil Magny, guys that he cannot find his range in against, that do not necessarily always enter the boxing range. The boxing pocket. For him to play his game, and that's where Jeff Neal wants to play his game. I don't think Neal has some insane wrestling or grappling entries that he's going to be able to mitigate Prates' game. I think Prates is going to be able to use that teep kick, use the body kick, use the front kick a lot in this fight. I think that left hand's going to land. I think jab will be money to find that left hand. I think Jeff Neal's going to try to make it a boxing fight that he's not going to be able to find himself getting inside, just like he did against Ian Garry, just like he did against Neil Magny. He just didn't find his moments against these longer guys that he struggles to fight, and I think this is the most dangerous guy that he's fought that is a longer style kickboxer that is going to hurt him every single time that Jeff Neal tries to enter and is out of range. And I think Prates does a very good job at that. And I'm predicting Jeff Neal to have his first knockout loss in the UFC. First knockout loss in his career since Kevin Holland outside of the UFC. Give me Carlos Prates by knockout in this fight, but it is a good fight. Now, love how the UFC still hasn't updated the Aaron Pico picture, but this is a very important fight for me to break down because a lot of people are on Lerone Murphy in this fight, and a lot of people do not know ball when it comes to Aaron Pico. This is a 28-year-old who entered MMA as one of the more highly touted prospects. And obviously he was very young, very, very young, losing a couple fights early on in Bellator. And understandably so, when you're very young, you're going to get checked, especially with the style that Aaron Pico has, where he is pressuring you. He is going to wrestle you. He has a really good knockout punch. He has good power overall. He has decent boxing inside. And this is the guy where this is the style fighter I love. This is the style fighter that I know succeeds in the UFC. Lerone Murphy is not the style fighter that succeeds at the absolute top of the UFC. I am voice cracking. I am cutting off. I'm like, everything's gone. Everything's gone. Some rejuvenation there. Anyways, Lerone Murphy is a guy who's coming in on 3 weeks' notice. He flew in, by the way, I think yesterday to Chicago. That's already bad enough. He's a guy who's going to be fighting on the back foot in this fight. He is a kickboxer that wants to keep you at range without really the best of power, without really the best of setups, in my opinion. I think he's a good jab. I think he's very disciplined in the fighting style he wants. But he's also 34 years old. And any single time he faces a grappler, in my opinion, he loses almost every single minute of these fights. Against Gabriel Santos, I thought he very clearly lost against Gabriel Santos, and Gabriel Santos got robbed in his debut on very short notice against Lerone Murphy. He got dominated by Malcolm Amrikani in round one. Amrikani is not a UFC caliber fighter. He's a good grappler, but Lerone Murphy getting out-grappled by him that embarrassingly is insane. Since then, he's fought Dan Ige, he's fought Josh Emmett, and there is one more fight, Edson Barbosa. So an old Edson Barbosa, who is a backwards style fighter, finally giving Lerone Murphy an opportunity to move forward. I don't think he looked that impressive against Edson. I think he looked okay. Against Dan Ige, he got cracked big time. And he managed a little bit in these fights, trying to win little minutes. And Ige is not necessarily the highest volume guy in the UFC. He's not setting up shots. He's landing some big ones. He's trying to time that big shot, and he landed that on Lerone Murphy, but Murphy recovered and won 29-28. Josh Emmett, another guy, doesn't really set up his strikes. He's very old, doesn't wrestle. He's not facing these grapplers anymore. And he's coming in against a guy who can wrestle, who can box with him on the inside, who actually sets up this boxing and pressures him. And I think Pico cuts off the cage well. This isn't Dan Ige. This isn't Josh Emmett. They don't chase. They cut off the cage. You cut off the cage. Aaron Pico can cut off the cage. That's a big issue with guys who want to move forward against guys who want to move backwards. They try to chase them. They don't know how to cut off the cage. They don't know how to time a shot trying to cut a guy off the cage. Aaron Pico does. Aaron Pico knows how to do that. Aaron Pico has pretty decent overall boxing on the inside. He has good power to hurt. He has better finishing ability than Lerone Murphy does. He is a much better wrestler than Lerone Murphy is, and that's going to be a big difference in this fight. The pressure backing up Lerone Murphy to the cage. Murphy's acceptance of that. Pico's relentless pressure in this fight. Pico's wrestling going into this fight. It's all going to make a difference, and he's going to land a shot on Lerone Murphy up top. I think he's going to be able to take him down. I think he's going to be able to chain a lot of these takedowns in, control Murphy, win some minutes, have some bigger moments on the feet. I don't see how Lerone Murphy wins this fight. He's not going to have the bigger moments. He's not going to be keeping Pico at bay, playing this point fighting game, especially on 3 weeks' notice. I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that Aaron Pico is going to come out like Patchy Mix, because he's nowhere near the fighter that Patchy Mix is. I predicted Mario Bautista to beat Patchy Mix, because Patchy Mix is not a good striker. He's not a good wrestler. Aaron Pico is. I understand Patchy Mix was a champion at Bellator. People were considering him the best bantamweight champion in Bellator. Load of garbage propaganda that we had with Patchy Mix. And Aaron Pico is the guy to compete at the top of featherweight. And this whole Bellator conversation of Bellator fighters have like a 40% debut success rate, whatever it is. You cannot play these games as if not every fighter is going to be different. If Usman Nurmagomedov came in fighting in lightweight in his debut, a lot of people would be picking him against most lightweights. If Paul Hughes came in and fought in lightweight, a lot of people would have been picking him against a lot of these lightweights that we have in the UFC. There are some good caliber content. There's some good caliber. Jesus, what am I even saying? Good caliber opposition coming in from Bellator. Good caliber fighters coming in from Bellator. Competition. That's what I was looking for. I'm lost, man. What's it called? Not Aaron Pico. Kayla Harrison, another one of them. Kayla Harrison just came in. Everybody knew she was going to dominate because people saw her become a champion. This is a guy who's very young coming into the UFC from Bellator. You don't usually see that. You don't usually see a guy without this championship level experience at Bellator coming in. It's because he is such a highly touted prospect that has developed, that has grown, that has become much more physical, much well shaped into his 145-pound body. If you look at him, he's chiseled. This guy's out of his mind with his physique. Really good power, really good wrestling, really good pressure, the exact style you want to beat Lerone Murphy. And I think the UFC is like in a dream right now, being able to put Lerone Murphy on 3 weeks' notice to fight Pico. Like, they're praying to God that Lerone Murphy loses this fight and Aaron Pico shows out. And I think he's going to do that. I think Aaron Pico is going to win by decision. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people that don't necessarily know anything about his game in this fight. Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev, the middleweight title bout to go ahead and finish off this card as the main event of the evening. And Dricus du Plessis, of course, on his way to becoming one of the greatest of all time in middleweight. I mean, maybe arguably the greatest middleweight of all time. You could argue that his resume would, if he beats Khamzat Chimaev, arguably by finish more than likely. Let's say it's going to be by finish. That's 7 finishes and 10 wins in the UFC. 2 wins over Sean Strickland, who was one of the best defensive statistical strikers in UFC history, statistically defensive strikers in UFC history. Like, nobody lands on Sean Strickland the way that DDP did, apart from like Alex Pereira with a big shot. Anyways, DDP exposed him, honestly, in that second fight. Then he goes on to finish at Israel Adesanya. He finishes Robert Whittaker. I mean, the championship level competition that he has beaten and finished, insane. And if he beats and finishes Khamzat Chimaev and Chimaev's first ever loss in his MMA career, we're going to be talking numbers about DDP being 10-0 in the UFC with what he's done in his MMA career. But that's not going to happen, is it? Khamzat Chimaev is the better fighter. Khamzat Chimaev is the better striker. Khamzat Chimaev is the bigger fighter in this fight. Khamzat Chimaev is the much better grappler in this fight by a significant margin. Whenever we see Dricus du Plessis grappling in MMA, offensively, he's doing it pretty well against guys who cannot grapple to save their lives, especially defensively grapple. We see him getting taken down and putting in a horrible position by Derek Brunson, where Derek Brunson's almost locking in a choke on him. No hooks, nothing great. Derek Brunson's not that good of a jiu-jitsu player whatsoever. He's just a sloppy, wet blanket type of grappler against low-level guys at middleweight during his time. Brad Tavares had Dricus du Plessis in mount. That's also a big concern. Also moving forward, who else? Robert Whittaker shot a double leg on Dricus du Plessis. Took him down quite easily. For the love of God, I understand fighters improve, but Dricus du Plessis' defensive grappling has not been tested. In any single fight that he has grappled in, he has looked insanely exhausted in. Defensively, he cannot grapple. He is not that good of a defensive grappler. People are wildly overrating that. And Khamzat Chimaev is going to ride him like a bull. That's not the term, right? I completely whiffed on that. That was supposed to be like a good metaphor. I whiffed it. Khamzat Chimaev is going to smoke him. That's exactly what I'm saying. He's going to run through Dricus du Plessis. He is going to get him down. The first shot that he takes, he's going to get him down. And he's going to smother him. He's going to take his back, and he's going to beat the life out of DDP. DDP's scrambles on the map, nowhere near the caliber of Chimaev's scrambles. Even when people are starting to get out of positions from Khamzat Chimaev, his chaining from these positions, his IQ on the map, to put his arms in perfect situations, to grasp onto your body, whether it's a threat of the darts, threat of an anaconda, going back into a single leg, hooking you with a cradle. I mean, this guy is insane. His body lock, fantastic. His setup from those body locks with the trips, Unbelievable. This is a next level fighter. This is literally, in my opinion, arguably the best fighter in the UFC today. Probably better than Ilia Topuria. Probably better than Islam Makhachev. We just have to see him put it together and finally win a UFC title. And we're going to have a lot of conversations about Khamzat Chimaev. In my opinion, right now, the most dominant fighter, arguably in the UFC. You could probably compete with him and Topuria Makhachev as well. Different level, I think. I think it's a different level. I think we're going to showcase it. I think it's actually insane how much better he's going to look in DDP in this fight, and I cannot wait to watch Khamzat Chimaev finally become UFC champion. I think he can knock out DDP. I think he could submit him. I think DDP, biggest reliance in this fight is going to have to be waiting on having Khamzat Chimaev gas out, which I don't really think Khamzat Chimaev is going to be able to gas out in this fight too much, to where DDP has some substantial gas advantage in this fight. And he's going to be pressuring Chimaev and landing this big output on him, moving forward and hurting him in rounds 3, 4, and 5, where we don't really see DDP putting on some insane pressure performance in rounds 3, 4, and 5 too often. He has some flurries, but nothing too crazy like that. Not a Merab. He's not a Merab. He's not a Pantoja. He's not these style fighters. Khamzat Chimaev is going to finish Dricus Du Plessis. He's going to become Anu, and we're going to see a completely different level to Khamzat Chimaev's game and see what the activity of Khamzat Chimaev looks like as a UFC middleweight champion. We'll find out. I think the winner of this fight is never going to lose another fight in middleweight to anybody in the division. I mean, I really don't see a threat to most of them. I mean, RDR, I don't think has any sort of gas tank or good setups whatsoever to compete against either of these guys. I think DDP beats him. I think Chimaev beats him. I think they both finish RDR. Kyle Bahayo, Imavov, honestly, they're all decent at everything. They're both of those guys decent at everything, not really great at anything. Imavov and Bahayo are very mediocre fighters at the top level, basically. That's the best way for me to describe them. And the only other one I can think of is like Anthony Flavio Hernandez, who very weak to the body. I don't think he's a better grappler than Chimaev. I don't think he could really do anything to Chimaev in rounds 1 and 2. And I think Chimaev can finish him. I think DDP could hurt him to the body pretty badly. I think Fluffy versus DDP is a very good fight. I really don't see how Fluffy beats him. Really good pressure, really good pace. Honestly, pretty durable up top. The body work is going to be a concern. DDP does do some pretty good work to the body, really good kicks to the body. And DDP can manage with Fluffy. I don't know, DDP versus Fluffy is interesting. That's honestly the only one I'd be very intrigued in. Honestly, DDP versus RDR too. I don't think Khamzat Chimaev loses to another middleweight in the UFC right now. And new, Khamzat Chimaev finishing Dricus Du Plessis by submission round 1. And yeah, thank you guys all for watching. Thank you guys for being here. If you guys have any questions or comments or whatever it is, go ahead and comment below. I am also go ahead and follow me on TikTok. That's what I meant to say. Follow me on TikTok. Please subscribe to my channel if you guys are not already subscribed here, and go follow my TikTok at MMA_DBM. Posting on TikTok every single day. And I'll be posting on YouTube probably almost every single day for the rest of the week at the bare minimum. I'm trying my best. I already have another video lined up, another 2 lined up actually, so we'll get a good amount of videos going forward. Appreciate you guys all for watching. I will see you guys on tomorrow's video. Peace out.